Accidents happen. That's why State Farm agent Dale Nifong and his team are dedicated to getting your car fixed and back on the road as soon as possible. It's just part of being there. Call or visit Dale today. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
If you've read his bio, he's had stints in South Carolina, LSU, Georgia Tech, and Clemson. When he was assistant athletic director at LSU, he was fortunate enough there to be involved with Nick Saban. Everybody knows Nick Saban, and they won a national championship in 2003. I believe then, not too long after that, he came to Georgia Tech, and he did a lot of good things at Georgia Tech. I met Dan probably about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It was at a Georgia Tech function, and you know how it is when you're amongst a lot of people similar to this, or maybe a few more people than this. You meet, but you don't never really, a year later, you don't remember meeting that person as many people as he comes in contact with. So anyway, the way me and Dan kind of got hooked up was Mercer was recruiting his son, Grant. I believe Grant played at Walton High School. And you know, my boys played at Dublin, but anyway, we were up there, and we were on the first official visit, and we were sitting in there, and I said, you know, that looks like Dan Radakovich, and one of my sons said, well, because Ben was actually playing tight end at that time, and I believe the position coach had said that you know, Grant was going to visit. And he was playing center, I believe, and he was going to move to tight end or whatever when he came there. So anyway, Ben and Rob hooked up with Grant, and we saw Dan, and we revisited that function that we were at. He vaguely remembered, but anyway, we sat down because we really didn't know anybody else. And we were going through the cafeteria line, and if you've seen college pizza under the lamp for several hours. But anyway, the visit was very good. And anyway, Grant ended up signing in along with Rob and Ben. Well, in the meantime, Dan had left Georgia Tech and went to Clemson. And so Dan's a very busy man during the fall. And like I say, that's where we come into the picture with Marcy. And we met Marcy. I've told y'all, you really build a good friendship with a lot of families from all different areas when you travel with a team. So I knew Dan wasn't going to be able to come to very many games. So anyway, we got hooked up with Marcy and Jan, and we've had a really good time. And so, but an interesting thing about Dan is, you know, he's an AD at Clemson. He's been at some big universities. But Dan's leadership and all was recognized early on. He's been doing this for 26 years. And his leadership was recognized by the playoff committee, and 13-member committee, and he's one of 5 athletic directors that was nominated and elected to this committee. And everybody knows that they did it for the first year this year, and that decides the college football national champion, which everybody's been wanting for, I don't know, probably over 50 years. I've been hearing about it for, I know, 40-something years. But anyway, moving right along, I'm not gonna go into a lot of detail. I'm gonna bring Dan up. And I just would like for you to please help me welcome Dan Radakovich, Athletic Director at Clemson University. Appreciate it.
Well, Bubba, that was a great introduction. I really appreciate it. You know, as a director of athletics at a school such as Clemson, there are a lot of responsibilities, and probably one of the more important responsibilities is being able to come out and get in front of groups of people that care about your university. Now, I know there's some folks in here that care maybe a little more about Clemson than others, but and that's great, and I really enjoyed that. But you all care about your schools because you're fans of college athletics, and you're fans of the student athletes who participate in college athletics. And sometimes amongst the business that kind of gets in the way of college athletics, we have to take a step back and remember that the reason that we're so excited and we support our institutions, whether it's Clemson, whether it's Georgia Tech, whether it's Georgia. That's probably about it in here, I would imagine. Mercer. Always bring your wife to heckle you at speaking events. What I was going to say is, remember the student athletes, because that's the reason we're in this business as administrators and you're in this business as fans. Because at the end of the day, you want student athletes like Gerald here to graduate and become great members of the community, and I'm sure there are other student athletes here who are important members of this community. As Bubba said, it is a busy time, and people ask me, when is your downtime? I've been in the business 26 years. I haven't been able to identify that yet. I'm sure one day it will come to me. But you know, driving down here from Clemson, we stopped at Mercer, saw our son yesterday, and came over to Dublin. And as many times as Marcy and I and our family have driven along I-16, which is one of the more interesting highways in the United States, we never took the time to get off the road and go to, whether it was Dublin or Vidalia or Statesboro or some of the other places. And I'm sure that a lot of you do a great deal of traveling as well. And it kind of hit me as we got to Bubba's place today and he and I drove over here. What a jewel. What a jewel this town is. And being able to see the pride in the community, the St. Patrick's Day celebration that's coming up, the snow days, the real esprit de corps that's here within this community. That's special. And I hearken that back to the first time that I went to Clemson. Clemson is right off I-85, and it's between Charlotte and Atlanta. And it's about 13 miles off the road. And if you didn't take the time to jump off that interstate and drive up to Clemson, I think you'd be missing some things. It's a great little community, not unlike what you have here in Dublin. But I encourage all of you, as you are on that interstate, as you're moving along, to put a little extra time in your trip and get off that road and go visit some place that you haven't been before. Because that's truly one of the blessings that we have in life, is to be able to go to places we haven't been before. Certainly in the world of college athletics, we've been blessed having the opportunity to visit a number of different places that normally wouldn't be on our list. Boise, Idaho comes to mind. Not a place that you would like to go, but really is an outstanding place to be able to visit. So I wanted to just kind of frame everything with that, and now I'll get back to the speech. And while I'm finishing up here, I want you all to take a few minutes and think of some questions you'd like to ask, because we'll leave some time here at the end to answer questions about the College Football Playoff Committee, about Clemson, about intercollegiate athletics, anything that's on your mind. But the other day in Forbes magazine, there was an article that talked about athletic directors, because a lot of times I'll get the question, what do you do? What are your responsibilities? The favorite person that asked me that question one time was my dad about 10 years ago, and he looked at me. He was a steel worker for a number of years, and he goes, "Dan, could you explain to me exactly what you do? Because you don't make anything. You're not. How do you contribute to success to society?" So I had to explain to him that I'm kind of, what we do is manage the futures of a lot of young people. And we manage them in very different ways. We manage them by trying to put the right leaders and mentors in front of them. People like Dabo Sweeney, people like Brad Brownell at Clemson, Paul Johnson, Brian Gregory, Nick Saban, all of the people that I've had the great pleasure to be around as mentors to young people, put them in place and allow them to do their jobs in order to bring quality young men and women to a school to, number one, get an education. And an education that they might not normally have had the opportunity to get. They're blessed with a talent. And many times people look at intercollegiate athletics and they say, well, gee, you're giving a full scholarship to a person that might not have the same educational capabilities as someone else who might be coming out of high school as a valedictorian or whatever. We'll take a step back from that and say people in this room and in the community all possess different talents. And the talents that you pull together as a community are not unlike the talents you pull together as an athletic program. These young men and women have special talents that they're bringing to Clemson, that they're bringing to Georgia, that they're bringing to Georgia Tech, to move that particular part of the institution that is recognized as being important. If it was a company, the athletic program would be their marketing arm, okay? It would be their marketing arm. It's how you know. How many people in this room have ever heard of Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington? Now, keep your hands up. Why do you know Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington? Thank you. They have a great physics program there, I think. But you're not going to know that. So we are the quintessential front porch of institutions. And I think that's important. We have to understand our place inside that organization. And we have to be good stewards of the name and the brand of that organization. And that's what we try to do. So as athletic directors, we try to make sure that we're bringing the right people together in order to continue that mission to make the institution better. Our president at Clemson, Jim Clements, recently came there from West Virginia, and he's all about brand. He's a wonderful salesperson. He's a great fundraiser. He's a great educator as well. But he understands the value of athletics and how it can help bring people together on a Saturday afternoon, some folks that maybe have some interest in athletics, but more so have interest in Clemson, and allow those people to give of their time or their resources to forward the entire university. He's not going to be able to get them there to see a business ethics seminar. He's not going to be able to get them there to an engineering class, but he can get them there to see a football game or a basketball game and utilize those in the best way possible in order to move Clemson forward. So that's one of the things that we do as an athletic director. You know, it's an interesting path, and you can see that in the bio, and every once in a while I'll read my bio for a couple of reasons. Number one, to make sure that there's no mistakes in it. I do know George O'Leary pretty well. Read it so there's no mistakes. And second of all, just to understand that, okay, I was at some of these places, and what can I get from that experience that I had at South Carolina in the mid-90s or LSU in the early 2000s to bring to the job that I have right now? Because our business is very rote. You know, every August we're going to play football. Every November basketball will start, and in the spring, weather permitting, baseball will start. So we do the same thing over and over, but we need to be able to do it better. And what were some of the things that happened at those places? And there is some commonality associated with that. And one is we were always building something. We were always building something or renovating things. And it's not that we did that just because. It was due to the fact that our customer in an athletic program is the student athlete. They're our best asset. So how do we gather better assets? We do some things associated with our facilities or our coaches, et cetera, to bring those really good assets to the institution. One of those things are facilities. And right now at Clemson, we're about halfway into the middle of $175 million facility renovation. We have in our football stadium $25 million worth of facility upgrades to our suites and our club seats. Bill McClelland, who was the athletic director of Clemson in the mid-'80s, had this crazy idea of building suites inside a football stadium. And Bill was the first. Clemson was the first collegiate venue in the country to have suites. And it was a great idea, and basically there had been nothing done to those suites until this renovation. So we're making sure that the people who are investing in those areas are getting great return, because that part of our customer base, our fans, certainly desire some different experience than maybe they had in the mid-'80s. So we're spending about $25 million there. We're finishing off the west end zone of the stadium and creating a bridge so that you can walk from the north to the south side of the stadium a lot easier than what you normally would be able to do now. We're working at our baseball stadium to give them a facility upgrade that'll help our student athletes, both from a performance perspective and an experience perspective, have a better time playing baseball at Clemson, and really try to, again, recruit those better assets to our program. So those are 3 projects where shovels are in the ground right now. We're looking for final approvals on a renovation of Littlejohn Coliseum that'll change that building, redo practice facilities, coaches' offices, so that the coaches and student athletes, because of the time demands that are on that group, that they'll have better opportunities to see one another and talk to one another during the course of a week. They're only allowed 20 hours of practice per week, but it's important that they have more time than that to get to know one another and blend together as a team. So the Littlejohn project will not only change the fans' experience and the game day experience, but also the practice opportunity. We're also, our Board of Trustees recently gave approval for a football operations center, which will be near our football indoor practice facility, which will house everything associated with Clemson football, from the training area to the strength area to the nutrition area to the meeting spaces, coaches' offices, and locker rooms. It'll be a fabulous building. It'll be the home for Clemson football for the next 50 years. It will be a special place, and we're really looking forward to that. Our tennis program, especially our women's program, which is nationally ranked, we're looking to do a project there, as well as, probably my favorite, our academic hall area at Clemson. Clemson was one of the first, back in the early 90s, to dedicate a space in the middle of campus for student-athlete academic purposes. And that spot for everybody at Clemson is known as Vickery Hall. Well, Vickery Hall hasn't been touched since the 90s. And we need to give it a little bit of a facelift as well. Not only exterior, but some upgrades inside to make sure that we're keeping up with the technological world that our student athletes live in today. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, a lot of the projects that are going on at Clemson. We have a great fundraising organization, IPTAY. I pay 10 a year. And folks who are in IPTAY, they kind of laugh. I pay thousands a year now, and that's right, Gerald. That's the best part of it. But it really is the bedrock to allow us to do what we do. IPTAY has over 15,000 members. It's the oldest fundraising organization in the country. Started in the mid-'30s, and it really has allowed Clemson athletics to reach out into the community. And it did start at $10 a year. And reach out into the state of South Carolina and into North Georgia, and really get the folks who are passionate about Clemson athletics to give back and be a part of that program. You can meet many of them, if not all of them, on a Saturday afternoon in Memorial Stadium, whether it's inside amongst the 80,000 or certainly the 125,000 that just happened to stop by Clemson on a Saturday afternoon for a football game. It is a special place. If you have a seat in the south upper deck, probably one of the only places in the country where you can see mountains and water at the same time. The waters of Lake Hartwell and the mountains into the distance. Beautiful, beautiful spot. So if you haven't been to a game at Clemson, make sure you put that on the list. It truly is one of the great spectacles in college football. Speaking of college football, Bubba touched on it a little bit. I was very fortunate to be a part of the inaugural College Football Playoff Committee. It was, it was the best professional and personal experience of my life. And I learned a lot from it as it related to my day-to-day job. because there were 12 of us together. Archie Manning was named, but had some surgery and couldn't be involved in the deliberations. But there were 12 of us together, and we all came to our decisions from very different angles. And we looked at things a lot differently, but at the end of the day, we learned how to listen to varying opinions and come to a consensus. And we miss that a lot, I think, in our day-to-day world. We were forced to do that. I mean, literally locked in a room, and you can't leave until you come up with these 4 teams. And what might have been looked at as a very difficult task ended up being a really good one and an enjoyable one. Because number one, there was incredible respect throughout the room for everyone's opinion. From Steve Weberg, who was an award-winning columnist for USA Today, to Tom Osborne, national championship football coach. From Barry Alvarez, athletic director and great football coach, took over and won another bowl game. We teased Barry, YouTube Barry Alvarez, and look at the dance he did after their Outback Bowl win. It's a classic. But Barry Alvarez to Colonel Mike Gould, former superintendent at the Air Force Academy. Very disparate backgrounds. Pat Hayden, great NFL and college quarterback, Rhodes Scholar, and Tyrone Willingham, former head coach at 3 different places. And then there was this lady, Condoleezza Rice, who, when she was appointed to the committee, there was a lot of eyebrows raised. And I'm here to tell you that if she was in this room, and I'm stretching here maybe a little bit with some doctors in the room, but certainly in that room, she was the smartest person to walk in the door and the most prepared. She is one of the most outstanding individuals I've ever met in my entire life. She knew college football. She was prepared each and every week to come in and talk about why a team is better than another team based on their schedule, who they've played, who's injured, who they have upcoming on their schedule. It was tough, and it really spurred all of us on to make sure we were prepared to be able to converse with her. When she started to go down a road and with a point, it was very well thought out, and it was very well concluded that this was her rationale for why a certain team should be placed in a certain place. Just an incredible woman, and certainly someone who's given great service to our country as well. But there's the 12 of us. We're in that room, and we come together, and we pull the 4 teams together, and I think at the end of the day, that was a really good 2 games, 4 teams, and ultimately Ohio State, who came in as the number 4 seed, winning the national championship. People ask all the time, did that vindicate what the committee had pulled together? And I don't feel like we were vindicated. Those were the 4 best teams. They happened to carry a number to the left of their name saying 1, 2, 3, or 4. But realistically, the committee member said any one of these 4 teams can win the championship. We were forced to make sure that there was seeding so that we knew where to place the schools for their games. But it was a lot of fun. We debriefed a little bit after we made the rankings. We were together at the national championship game, which, if you've never been to AT&T Stadium in Dallas, Texas, that's another one. That's another one for the list, because it is by far, it is the Roman Colosseum of the United States. Thousands of years from now, when the United States is like Rome and all the rest of that, many, many moons down the road, that place will stand, and those video boards will still be there. You find yourself consciously having to watch the game because these boards are so big, and it's easier just to watch the scoreboards. But from the concourses to the parking to the whole experience walking in, it's just fabulous. So if you're ever in the Arlington area, between Dallas and Fort Worth. Make sure you take one of the tours. And of course, Jerry Jones will charge you for that tour. It was a very expensive stadium to build. What I'd like to do now is just open it up for questions. In January, the Power Five conferences, ACC, SEC, Big Ten, Big 12, and Pac-12 met for the first time as a group. And we were given that opportunity through NCAA legislation called autonomy. And one of the things that came out of that meeting, in fact, the first vote of that group, was to allow student athletes to receive monies up to the cost of attendance to attend a school. Right now, a college athlete was able to receive room, board, tuition, fees, and books. Those 5 things were the only remuneration student athletes were able to get. When you send your child to college, there's actually a 6th category, and that is miscellaneous expenses. Amen. And miscellaneous expenses, yes, miscellaneous expenses, people say, well, what is that for? Well, that's for haircuts and bedding and pizza and transportation and just living expenses associated with the life of a student athlete. Up until this vote, student athletes were not allowed to receive that money as part of their scholarship. Now we're able to do that. So a full scholarship student athlete will now be able to receive that. This isn't earth-shattering as it relates to colleges, because if you were fortunate to be a presidential scholar, whether it was at Georgia Tech or even at Clemson, you were able to receive those monies as part of your scholarship. So a presidential scholar was actually getting more money than a student athlete. Well, now we'll be able to set that aside, and they'll be able to receive those dollars. The X factor in all of this is the cost of attendance is different at just about every school, because it's very localized for that environment. So for example, at Clemson, the cost of attendance, miscellaneous expense line, is $3,608. At Georgia Tech, where I'd previously been, and when I left 3 years ago, that number was about $1,900. It was just different based on where you are. Private schools, such as Duke, will have individualized cost of attendance based on where you live and where you come from to attend Duke. So that's one of the things that really hasn't been flushed out yet. Coaches, they worry that Johnny will go to school X because he's going to make $200 more there through the miscellaneous expense than another place. And somewhere down the road, we may have to look at that and see if that really does make a difference. But I think of all the factors, certainly the tuition, fees, room and board are different at every school. This is different as well. So we'll see if that's going to be an issue, and if not, if it is, I'm sure we'll look into it and try to make those changes. But I don't know that giving that money is going to change the basic structure of college athletics. That's just putting our student athletes on the same plane as some other folks within the institution who, by virtue of how they got to school, had the ability to receive those dollars. So I look at it as a real positive for our student athletes. The committee came together. Since we don't know what the final votes were to get to those, I'm not sure whether there was unanimity, but there was clear consensus for the 4 teams. I think that we have one data point for the 4-team playoffs, and that was this past year. There was a lot of worry that the Rose Bowl that hosted one semifinal or the Sugar Bowl that hosted the other, how would those games be attended? Depending upon what teams are there and where the championship game was. So I think we have to go a little further into the process before we really begin to look at whether there's the need for expansion. It's a little more difficult in football than it is in basketball, because in basketball, if you're in the NCAA tournament, you're taking a regional jet of 75 people and you can traverse the country and go wherever you want. And that includes, your players, your 30-member band, your managers, trainers, all the rest of those fit on one 75-passenger plane, and boom, there you go. Football's a little different, probably 10 times that many people when you put together the team and the bands and all the things that really make college football what it is. So I think we're going to, the contract with ESPN, who has bought the rights to the college football playoff, is for 11 more years, and we'll see. Right now, we're going to stay with the 4 teams at least through this contracted period. Yes, thank you, and my wife thanks you for that question as well. The original 13 people on the committee will be all together again next year, and then there will be a rotation. 4 new people will come on in year 3, 4 new people will come on in year 4, and then rotate through that as well. Well, no. the time. We were together in Dallas from 2 o'clock on Monday through about 2 o'clock on Tuesday. Now, we had to travel to get there, so there was some time spent there. So basically, Mondays and Tuesdays, I was out of the office. But over the course of a week, I'd probably spend 20 to 25 hours outside of that period of time watching film. The DVR is a wonderful thing, being able to watch games that you weren't able to see in person, as well as some of the technology that they gave to us to be able to have it downloaded on an iPad to be able to watch games as well. So probably 20 to 25 hours outside of the meeting time. And that goal would be to graduate student athletes. I would tell you that the rates of graduation for student athletes have steadily increased due to the fact that you needed to be at certain benchmarks towards graduation in order to maintain your eligibility. So student athletes have met those, and they've hit those eligibility requirements, and when they're done, they're either graduated or they're very, very close to graduating. So graduation numbers have continued to rise. Some folks would say, on the opposite side of that, having a year in residence and making freshmen ineligible would make that go up even higher. And I think we have to look at, are we taking too much away from our product and by having freshmen ineligible? So that'll be the debate that will go on. I don't see that happening this fall. I think that debate will go on into the next year or so. Yes, sir.
I think in college basketball, the one-and-done phenomenon hurts the game. If I'm not mistaken, in baseball, if you turn down a draft opportunity when you graduate from high school and go to college, you're not eligible to be drafted again until your class reaches its 3 years later.
Correct.
Why would that not work in football and basketball? And what it might accomplish is graduation improvement, but also a coach knows they're going to have that kid for 3 years, like a baseball coach.
Your argument is right on point. The problem is the baseball rule and the football rule, which are both 3 years, were collectively bargained through Major League Baseball and the NFL with their player associations. The NBA collectively bargained with their player association that would allow entry into the NBA at age 19. So in order because the NCAA really can't pass that rule. It has no authority over the rules of the NBA. Now, we've worked with them, and we've said this would be great for college basketball. We would deliver to you, as your unpaid farm system, we would deliver to you a much better product. It hasn't been collectively bargained yet. It is still something that is important to college basketball, and if we could get that age from 19 to 20, you would see a 2-year stay by athletes at this point in time. So it's really an NBA issue, one that college is working hard to get done, but really have no purview. Yes?
Dan, I'll play the advocate, the devil's advocate here, because I know that I've heard Major League Baseball folks say that they can do more with an athlete in their system than he would get at college.
Right.
So that's an argument that you're going to get from them, is if they get them earlier, they can really concentrate on things that you can't do because of time limitations and resources, and they got to go to class and all that.
And that's absolutely true. The one thing that baseball has that basketball doesn't at this point in time is the ability for someone to sign out of high school and just skip college. Because as we all know in this room, college isn't for everyone. So if a student athlete feels like they're best served by going and playing professionally, they have that opportunity in baseball. They don't have that opportunity in basketball because of the age 19 rule. Yes, sir.
We all know that, especially in the South, football is going to be the 800-pound gorilla that drives an athletics program like Clemson or Georgia. How do you balance that with all of your other programs that don't have as much revenue?
That's a great question. And one of the things that happens as it relates to football and its ability to generate revenue, to run the entire program, that's another reason why college athletics isn't a business. And we talk about it as a business, but in reality it isn't. Because if it was a business, you would have two products, football and men's basketball. Because they're the only ones that stand on their own and create a profit for the organization. But in order to be a Division I athletic program, you have to sponsor a minimum of 16 sports. So unless you're sponsoring those 16 sports, you can't play Division I football. So a lot of folks, myself included, say, well, since I'm sponsoring these other sports, let's be good at it. Let's be good at it and give those student athletes a great opportunity to be successful.